Good morning. We're going to hope all our technology works today. I would like to call the Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Ed and CIP to order. Welcome to everyone joining us here in Carson City and in Las Vegas and online. I am Senator Marilyn Dondero Loop, and I will be chairing this Joint Subcommittee meeting today. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblymember Howdigi. Here. Assemblymember Hafen. Assemblymember Koenig. Here. Assemblymember Monroe Moreno. Here. Assemblymember O'Neill. Assemblymember Torres Fawcett. Here. Assemblymember Yeager. Here. Senator Buck. Here. Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Scheibel. Here. Senator Stone. Here. Assemblymember Backus. Present. And Chair Dondero Loop.
Here. Thank you very much, and please mark those that are not here present as they arrive. I know we have some bill hearings going on, and so people will be in and out. Thank you. Before we move on to today's budget hearings, I would like to go over the housekeeping items. Please remember to silence your electronic devices, and please, if you're providing testimony today, state and spell your name. I know that once you've said it, it seems like you've already said it, but for our minutes and our secretaries, and sometimes there's two ladies talking or two men talking, and the voices are hard to discern between. So thank you very much. Today we'll be hearing 7 budgets for the Nevada Department of Education, 2675, 2712, 2612, 2709, 2621, 2721, and 2710. And I see State Superintendent Joan Ebert and down in Las Vegas, and Deputy Megan Peterson here in in Carson City. And if there's anyone else you need to bring to the table, please feel free. And thank you for joining us on this snowy day in Carson City. And we will begin with budget account 2675. And we'll take a break between each budget so that we can ask some questions. So please get yourselves settled and go ahead and begin when you are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, State Superintendent Joan Ebert. I'm glad to be here with my team today who have spent a lot of time preparing for everyone. As we know, education, the educators in our education system prepares our workforce for tomorrow. And so with that, you have Deputy Peterson, who is an amazing Carson City graduate, and she will kick us off this morning.
Good morning, Deputy Superintendent Megan Peterson, MEGAN-PETERSON for the record. As just a quick reminder and overview from our previous presentation, the Department of Education has approximately 219 employees across 3 divisions within the department. Today's presentations are going to focus on offices and budget accounts within the Student Achievement Division and the Educator Effectiveness and Family Engagement Division. As mentioned, we'll go over 7 budget accounts today, starting with budget account 2675. This budget account is referred to as the Standards and Instructional Support or Office of Teaching and Learning. This is where curriculum development occurs, providing guidance and technical support to school districts in the areas of professional development, including our regional professional development programs, as well as I mentioned, instructional materials that align with the standards as set by the State Board of Education. Today, in an alignment with past presentations, our slides with green headers represent positions related enhancements, either additions or subtractions due to expiring grants. The first enhancement today, E126 in budget account 2675, is the request for an education program supervisor. Currently within this office, we have around 22 full-time positions that report to one director. And so this position is requested to provide additional supervisory support between the director and those additional staff. This position would specifically focus on areas of instruction for K through 12 for 7 of the education program professionals in that office. Next, moving on to operational enhancements noted by the blue header. Our first enhancement represents funding for Zoom and Smartsheet licenses. As we've mentioned in previous hearings, these were provided with ESSER funds, and with those funds now expiring, we're looking to bring those expenses back into the accounts where they are providing support to those staff. And so we have Zoom and Smartsheet. Smartsheet is a project management platform that we use to help manage the work, planning milestones and implementation, as well as receiving materials and monitoring information. Next is an enhancement for conference registration fees, approximately $16,000 in each year for staff to attend conferences to remain relevant in the landscape, again, within curriculum development for our school districts and charter schools. And then next is an enhancement for our Office 365 productivity suite, including the email, the Office 365 cloud for Word, Excel, and those types of things for staff that had not previously been budgeted. And then last is an enhancement for, as I mentioned, the reallocation of the rent schedule that we had to realign the positions and where they're located within the buildings. Next, these two enhancements are companion enhancements from budget accounts 2697 and 2612, transferring the expenses and work that is now being led by the standard instructional support team. So it's bringing those expenses into budget account 2675 where the work is being conducted. And so for transparency, aligning the work with the expenses. And these focus in the areas of the Academic Standards Council, as well as financial literacy and science and computer education, which were previously in our assessments, data, and accountability team. Next are the one-shot appropriations that have been identified in this account according to the governor's recommended budget. This includes licenses for the professional development platform that is being utilized by teachers and students as well. You may know this as the Canvas licenses. This allows us to provide standard instruction to teachers across the state, as well as opportunities for students. So we do have it represented in a couple of different areas within the agency, depending on the scope of work that those offices have. And then next, we have 3 enhancements that focus on providing funding to establish SEALs. The first one has to do with STEAM or STEM activities, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and the arts. And then the next enhancement focuses on a biliteracy seal for students who are eligible after completing specific coursework. And then finally is an enhancement for the civic seal of excellence for students who obviously have shown great aptitude in these areas and completed the coursework as required. And so these would be seals or designations that go on their degrees when they graduate to show the additional education that they received in those areas. The next enhancement, E142, is for a digital learning platform, also known as the Digital Learning Collaborative, that was previously being supported and currently supported by Discovery Education. This was a partnership that we had with the Nevada Mines Association that was previously split with their support. I would note that we do have a budget amendment removing this from the budget. As we are aware, we are working to balance budgets, and we identified within our teacher licensure account a need to support the licensing system. And so this enhancement will be removed in order to fund that instead. And then next, in alignment with the IT replacement schedule, we have funding to replace computers that have met the 5-year replacement schedule and are identified for replacement in fiscal year 26 and 27. Each computer replacement system costs about $2,300, so you're looking at about 7 and 6 replacements based on what's on the been budgeted. And with that, I will pause for questions.
Thank you so much for that information. And I believe we do have a question from Senator Scheibel.
Thank you so much. I want to go back to the beginning of the budget where you were talking about adding that second supervisory position. And I'm, excuse me, my first question is how would that change the duties and responsibilities of the current education programs director?
Megan Peterson for the record. I would like to allow the director of that office to speak to it so that way she can give you the exact details on that. Her name is Shauna Jensen and she is in Las Vegas.
Good morning, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Deputy Peterson and Chair. This is Shauna Jensen for the record. Just appreciate the opportunity to express that the load is heavy in the Office of OTL. I am currently overseeing several content areas as well as grants, including PBS and RPDP. We oversee the work of adoption of content standards, the instructional materials review process, and of course, all the work that goes into policy and supporting the administrative functions of an office. And currently, we are unable to efficiently meet the needs of that requirement. We find that this position could increase our efficiency and effectiveness, and overall we would be able to serve the students of Nevada much better if we were able to distribute the load. One other problem that's difficult with only one person is oftentimes I'm required to be in more than one place at one time. So literally, both physically and figuratively, we are in need of this second position. So once again, we need the assistant person to help us better manage responsibilities, improve our morale in our staff, and ultimately enhance our educational experience across the state.
Just a brief follow-up. Could you be a little, and I do appreciate the answer, and I think that was very helpful. Could you be a little bit more specific about what's currently not getting done or not getting done timely that an additional person would help the office to be able to accomplish?
One example is that we're behind in the implementation of content standard reviews and providing efficient guidance support documents that impact every single student, because since the pandemic we have not been able to catch up with that responsibility. So that's just one area. It seems like daily more and more projects come our way, including legislation such as the Read by Three law or the implementation of the Holocaust and other genocide responsibilities that don't come with enough support to accomplish those goals. And so we lag behind in things that we would need to be more efficient on.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions on this particular budget item? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to budget item 2712.
Megan Peterson for the record. Office of Student and School Supports is the office that is supported through budget account 2712. A lot of their work is federally focused in the areas of supporting underachieving schools, districts, and students through supplemental and enriched learning opportunities. This is in alignment with requirements also established through Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. And provides, as I mentioned, training and support through what are known as school performance plans, district performance plans, rigorous interventions for schools with additional needs, and those types of activities. The first two enhancements identified on this slide represent adjustments within the base budget in the operating account and provides funding utilized through master service agreements with agencies like Manpower and Marathon in order to meet short-term requirements in order to align with the Title I program requirements. And so the first one represents 4 additional staff that were added through these services for our Title I programs, compliance, monitoring, and support in those areas. And then the second enhancement represents 2 education program equivalent professionals who supported assistance with, as I mentioned just previously, the more rigorous interventions for schools who are most at risk and need of additional support to improve outcomes for students. These are, as I mentioned, temporary positions, and so the workload isn't consistent in order to make these permanent. And so just to meet those changing needs, they're brought on temporarily to support that work. Our next enhancement is for a contract. Again, this was funded elsewhere. We're bringing this in as part of the base budget to maintain the last year of functions. We may need to evaluate this contract going forward. It may need to be extended, but currently we only have identified funding for fiscal year 26. This is a platform that districts use to support, as I mentioned, the school performance plans and the district's performance plans that are implemented in order to help improve their implementation and support of students who need additional supports. Typically, these are low poverty type situations. And then second enhancement is, again, for Smartsheet licenses. This is a platform that is used pretty universally throughout the department at this point to project manage the work that we oversee. The next enhancement is for a contract that provides comprehensive professional development that increases instructional capacity for educators and student leaders in our state. It's nuanced to the specific scope within those areas, and so this is funding to continue that work. And then the next enhancement is a transfer from budget account 2712 to 2715, which is our special education account, the IDEA funding, and this aligns expenditures with a position that had previously been moved to that account, and this moves the rest of the expenditures associated that were missed during that initial transfer. Next are our one-shot appropriations as recommended. This again is for computer replacements. The first year we have 7 computer replacements that were recommended, and yes, we have a significant number in the second year. I believe that was approximately 12 computers that needed to be replaced. And with that, I will pause for questions.
Thank you so much for that information. And with that, I believe Assemblywoman Hadagi?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here again. It's nice to see you. I just have a quick question, well, a couple quick questions on the federal grant award administrative cost caps. So it's my understanding that the administrative expenses may exceed the cap for individual grants, and I was just hoping you could kind of walk us through what potential consequences or implications there are if those expenses exceed the prescribed administrative cap limit for federal grant awards, both in terms of regulatory penalties and the impact to future funding eligibility.
Megan Peterson for the record. So this is something that is part of the daily work of our budget analysts and the accounting team. They have a spreadsheet where they're tracking and managing this, and we do have a variety of different caps or indirect rates that we are able to charge against the various grants. And so it is something that they're monthly reconciling and looking to make sure that we don't exceed those percentages. If we are in a situation where it does look like that is going to occur, then we do meet with our programmatic staff and look for ways to try to mitigate that, look for other funding opportunities to use instead, to try to keep that within those caps. In a situation where we may have exceeded that, we would look to use our reserves to help offset those costs, to try to keep the budget balanced and moving forward. So it is an ongoing part of the duties and responsibilities to make sure that we're staying aligned with those. To date, we have not been identified as having exceeded it, and so we haven't had any conversations about impacts to future funding.
And can I follow up on that question? I guess I guess I was kind of just trying to understand like what happens if you do exceed them and like you don't have resources to pay them. Like what are the penalties that we can incur if they are exceeded?
Megan Peterson for the record. So that can vary, obviously, depending on to the extent at which we exceeded it. It would be a conversation that we would have with the federal partners. We would potentially have to reduce funding in a future year. They are conversations that we would work through on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. And then just to follow up just on the same area. So has the Nevada Department of Education ever been penalized in any way for exceeding the cap?
Megan Peterson for the record, not to my knowledge, but there are past years that I would not necessarily have access to that information, but it has not been identified for me.
Okay, and then my last question, Madam Chair, was just you kind of touched on it, that it sounds like it's the daily work of your budget team, and then you kind of referenced that they reconcile monthly. So do you guys have a plan in place to make sure that you don't exceed the caps, or is it just a team and they check it monthly? Is that the plan? Just so I understand.
Megan Peterson for the record, it is part of the monthly reconciliation that they track the expenses that are being charged, and as we approach, or if we get to that state, then we are having conversations with our programmatic staff. And to help clarify too, the administrative cap is over the life of the program, and so while we may expend in 1 year, as long as we have reduced and mitigated in the next year, we are still within compliance. So it is just part of the active management of the funds that we oversee, that it is part of the review process.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. That answered my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And with that, I believe Assemblymember Torres Fawcett.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you again. If you could just answer, why were the updated fund maps not included in the governor's budget?
Megan Peterson for the record, this goes back to our capacity right now. We are just severely behind on a number of things. I have one accounting assistant who is out of the office on FMLA and has been for over 6 weeks. We have 3 budget analysts who have less than a year of experience working through our challenges with the situation at the federal level, trying to mitigate and manage cash flow. We have just had very limited capacity, and we've been unable to meet that. We are working on providing those within this week, though.
Thank you for that. And given that the revenue expected for the agency's cost caps could be overestimated, what safeguards are in place to prevent the agency from overspending its budget if its authority exceeds the projected revenue?
Megan Peterson, for the record, could I clarify, when you say the agency's budget, are you referring to our operating budget or all of the budgets that would include the people-centered funding plan?
Just the specific budget.
Megan Peterson, for the record, this is something that we're actively looking to understand and review and manage and mitigate. It is a case-by-case situation that we're still working with our technical experts to evaluate and understand.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions on this budget? Okay, Assemblymember Backus.
Thank you so much, Chair. And my question is kind of like a what-if scenario. Looking at this budget, it appears that for the Title I assistance that Nevada schools receive, it's kind of based on a formula of a variety of things. And as I understand it, is the amount of money that the state of Nevada receives for Title I is greater than if we were to receive funding based on just a per population basis, because it appears like other things are taken into consideration, such as poverty data, number of children in foster homes, and total number of school-age children in the state. And then, but as I understand, in Nevada, we're unique. We receive a little greater proportion than just based on a population basis. It looks like you understand what I'm saying. Oh, maybe not. Okay, but my question is this, is I understand that there may be a change where the federal government may be issuing these dollars directly to the state based on a per population basis, and I wasn't sure what kind of financial impact that would have, as right now we're potentially going to receive for fiscal year 2026 and 2027 about $183 million. And I just wanted to know if we would know how that would adjust if the formula changes on the federal side and we just get an allocation based on population.
Megan Peterson for the record. So this is one of the things globally that we're looking at as things are changing at the federal level, what could be the impacts to the funding. At this point in time, I don't have a clear understanding of what that shift might look like, because there are so many different variables that can contribute to that based on how they choose to move forward with it. But we are working with the technical assistance agencies that we have, chief state school officers, CCSSO, and similar agencies to try and understand the direction that they're going, and then that way we can get enough details to be able to model and understand what those impacts would be. But it is a moving goalpost at the moment, and we are working through additional concepts. If we were to move to a block grant type situation, how would we need to change our procedures and policies to adapt? And then again, depending on the provisions that they add on top of that, that could change the direction that it goes. So it is something that we're investigating and looking to understand, but we don't know what those outcomes are yet.
Madam Chair.
It's Superintendent Ebert.
Apologies, I was looking around the room to see who was talking. Apologies, Superintendent, please go ahead.
No. Thank you. To add, Deputy Peterson did a wonderful job, but I do want to thank Assemblymember Bacchus for raising the question. Specifically, we have to and are, sorry, I'm getting feedback, tracking this situation, and we need to elevate it, not only for ourselves at the state level, but for the individual school districts. As Deputy Peterson noted, they haven't told us exactly how they're going to implement. And so, we're doing our best with the crystal ball. But if they do shift it and not use the current metrics, such as the ones that you had mentioned, right? Homelessness and other factors, then Nevada could end up receiving less money than in the past. So we are tracking it, and as we continue, we will work with your staff to make sure that everybody is informed on what is transpiring at the federal level and how it will affect our state.
Thank you very much for that additional information. All right, any other questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, we will move on to budget account 2612. And if you'll give us just a minute, we're going to switch gears up here. All right, I think we're ready to go on to budget number 2612.
Megan Peterson for the record. Budget account 2612 provides funding to support the activities of providing training, recruitment, development, and retention of teachers within our school districts and our charter schools. It also provides the funding for activities such as the Milken Awards, Nevada Teacher of the Year, as well as supporting the Nevada Educator Performance Framework. This is the framework that provides evaluation and information on the performance of the educators in our state. The first enhancement for this account provides funding in the amount of $6,825 in each year of the biennium to provide funding for staff to attend conferences. So that way, again, they can stay relevant with the changing landscape for teacher licensure and teacher recruitment and retention, as mentioned. The next enhancement, again, in theme for our department this year, is the reallocation of an alignment of our rent and space for positions based on where they're located. And then the last enhancement for this slide is funding for the transferring funding for the financial literacy program. This, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, moves those funds into the account where those activities are managed by our Office of Teaching and Learning, or OTL. So moving those out, that way it aligns with the work and where it is being done. Next are our one-shot appropriations for this account. This includes funding $500,000 over the biennium, $250,000 in each year for the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. This provides funding for a contract in order for them to move to the next stage of the evaluation of the work that they are doing within that commission. Next is funding for the teacher exit and transfer, as well as the working conditions surveys for our educators, so that way we can stay aligned and in touch with what they are experiencing as they are moving or leaving the system, as well as what they're experiencing in their work place. Next is an enhancement, $1.3 million for each year. This funding is requested in order to provide it to the charter schools who are impacted by a change in methodology that we were required to make in our Title II allocations. And so this provides a little bit of a transition for them, so that way there's not a fiscal cliff as a result of that change. And then lastly, we have our computer replacement equipment for these offices, one in fiscal year 26 and two in fiscal year 27. And I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much, and I believe Assemblymember Backus has a question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Peterson. My question on this is just going to pertain to the one shot regarding the 250 and each biennium. Can you provide an overview of the study performed by the National Center on Education and the Economy during the 2023-24 interim, and how it impacted the work of the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education?
Megan Peterson for the record. For this one, I'm going to go to the superintendent, as she has worked with that group and can speak to this much better than I can.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Joan Ebert. I serve as the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The commission itself was created under Senate Bill 425 in the last legislative session to move us forward with a world-class, globally competitive and adaptable education system. It met 7 times starting in January 18th, 2024, broke into 4 different subcommittees, and specifically to how the commission is working with the Commission on School Funding to make sure that those dollars, as they are allocated out to our school districts, that we're lifting up the entire education system. And so there are 4 main areas I want to make sure that I am succinct in the report that was provided to the legislature. The policy recommendations, which align, sustain and accelerate the shift toward personalized competency-based learning, build an aligned system for recruitment, preparation, development, and teacher leadership trajectory. And I want to pause right there. A couple of things to making sure in alignment with the historic investment that you all made in education. Again, thank you very much. From the last legislative session, we have over 1,200 more educators in our classrooms today than we did last year. And that has to do directly because of the work that this legislature and the governor accomplished. Also, too, we have a 30% increase in retention rate. And so that work that the Commission on School Funding accomplished provided you with the reports. You enacted those recommendations. The recommendations here build an aligned system for recruitment, preparation, development, helps inform the Commission on the Commission on School Funding, as well as the work that was conducted by the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. The last two areas for recommendation were strengthen the next generation career pathways, which I know the workforce readiness, many different groups support, and then develop and implement a performance dashboard that communicates progress on future ready metrics. And as you know, we transparency within the Department of Education and creating dashboards where people have information and they don't have to wait for us to produce reports is what we're looking at. Thank you.
All right. I have a couple of questions for you. And I don't know whether it'll be the superintendent or deputy that answers it, but how was it determined originally that the $250,000 was needed in each year of the 25-27 biennium for 2 additional studies by the National Center on the Education and the Economy?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, the work that was accomplished over the biennium was the first step. It was really the analysis. So studying what high performing, when we look at the PISA assessment, which is the only international assessment that is made available. We have the NAEP here in the United States. When we look at the NAEP in the United States as well as international, and we think about being globally competitive, the work of the commission was really doing the analysis of where we can improve as a state in our education system. Both of these projects moving forward will address the policy recommendations that I just noted in the prior response, the personalized competency-based learning, the teacher prep, all of those components. So now it's not the analysis, but how do we implement, while we're currently running an education system, how do we implement and transform the education system moving forward? So it's the speed with which we want to accomplish this work within the state.
Thank you very much. And I think you sort of answered the next one, which was that I had, which was, how would this study build off the Commission on Innovation and Excellence work during the last biennium? How will it move forward? And I think you really answered that. So the other question that I had was, what would be the impact if the funding to contract for these studies provided for, but it's provided in the 25-27 biennium, but not in the future biennium. So what is the downfall, or what happens if there's no more money provided?
Thank you, Senator. Superintendent Ebert, for the record, the goals that have been laid out in the report, shifting from seat time that we have now, we have a system that was built on farming. That is not where we are today in 2025. And so as we shift out of seat time and ensuring what our students know and are able to do to competency-based, that just continues on the system that we have. what is exciting in the work that transpired over the last biennium and through the funding that was provided, and I guess I do want to step back. The legislature back in 2015 did create the opportunity for competency-based education. So we have, as a state, have always been forward-leaning. We've created the policies when we work with other states across the nation. They're like, oh my goodness, you've had this policy since 2015. Yes, we've had the policy, but we have not had the supports in place to make the shift. So we created space for the state to be able to move forward, but we did not provide any resources to make the shift because, again, you have to run the system that you currently have, create the space to innovate, which sometimes there's good things that come out of that, and then you find out what you need to change, and then merge the two systems out. And that's really where we want to go, is to accelerate what we know our system can do, provide the supports, and move forward.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Are there any other questions? Okay, I see none, which means we can move on to budget account 2709.
Megan Peterson for the record. Budget account 2709 is the account that holds both state and federal funding that is used to provide pre-K programs. This is in addition to budget account 2621. But today the focus is within our Nevada Ready Pre-K and the PGG type pre-K development grants. The first enhancement for this budget account is an education and information officer. This position is requested in order to provide the support for increasing capacity in the areas of our quality rating and improvement system that provides sustaining quality early care and education in our state. We have increased the number of agency or organizations supported within this area, and so this position will assist with ensuring that information is provided for them. And I'm sorry, I am realizing that the amounts on this slide do not align with the amount of that enhancement. We can get those updated numbers to you after this presentation. I do believe that those are representative of the amounts that are listed below for the pre-K personnel support. So additionally, there's an enhancement that will provide funding for 8 positions within the department, this account, 3 education program professionals, 1 program officer, 2 grant support personnel, and 2 administrative assistants, 1 within the Office of Early Learning and 1 for district support services. And these positions are needed to support the pre-K implementation within our state, including the subgrants under Nevada Ready Pre-K and the early learning literacy programs that are associated with budget account 2621. Previously, this support has been provided either through grants that are expiring, all grants that are expiring, either through the pre-K, PDG, or ESSER funds. And so because these programs are continuing, we do need to increase that permanent support within these budgets. The next set of enhancements and continuing the theme Smart Sheet licenses for the project management of these 3 programs, as well as enhancements for the business productivity. This is Office 365 platform for the 8 positions that were noted. And then again, rent reallocation for the positions within this office. Next are the one-shot appropriations, and again, this is for computer replacement of computers that have reached their 5-year lifespan, $19,000 in fiscal year 26 and $7,000 in fiscal year 27. And I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much, and I believe that Senator Canizaro has some questions.
I do have some questions. I think they're more along the lines, not necessarily of some of these, the position pieces, but along some of the funding generally for pre-K. So, okay, let's start with, can you tell us what is the intended amount per pre-K seat that is being recommended in the executive budget in each year over the biennium?
Megan Peterson, for the record, the department does have a bill that's been proposed, SB 58, that would align the pre-K amounts with those that are allocated through the pupil-centered funding plan as part of a long-term goal towards moving to universal pre-K. We did have some gaps in communication within our two teams, the fiscal team and our programmatic team. But the intent is to align it with the adjusted base funding that is provided through the pupil-centered funding plan to be reflective of what is the cost of educating students within those districts. So in general, we've been referring to the 9416, that is the statewide base, as a proxy, but it would be the intent to align them with the adjusted base in each district.
So each, depending on which school district the kids are in, that would define how much per seat is allocated, and it would match whatever that per pupil funding is in the PCFP.
Megan Peterson, for the record, that is correct.
Okay. So those amounts then we would expect would vary based upon the differing factors that play into the amounts for each school district.
Megan Peterson, yes, they would.
Okay. And I know, I think you might have, I was trying to look ahead on some of these slides, and some of this might relate to probably some things you're going to talk about, which if that's the case, you can go ahead and let me know. So why is it being recommended that funding for pre-K seats be split between two separate budget accounts, that of the Office of Early Learning and Development and that of the Early Childhood Literacy and Readiness account?
Megan Peterson, for the record, this was something that we did talk about internally about what would be the best way to approach this. The thought process and what we moved forward with was trying to keep transparency and separation between what is federally funded pre-K programs and state funded. I do know that currently, obviously, the Nevada Ready Pre-K is in 2709, and that's something that we would look in future years to move over, so that way we have clear transparency between what is funded by the state and not.
Because the Office of Early Learning and and Development, that one's the one that's mostly federal funding, Head Start, some grants and other things. But you just mentioned that the Nevada Ready program that has some state funding at some point would anticipate to move to the Early Childhood Literacy and Readiness account.
Megan Peterson, yes, that's correct.
Is, other than trying to internally be able to track what is state and what is federally funded, is there any other reason that you would want to keep those separate? Or is that more just like an internal money tracking issue?
Megan Peterson, for the record, it is an internal decision. There are no ramifications if we were to combine them that we're aware of at this time.
And historically, they have been combined, as I understand it, with some of the ways in which things have been funded out of the Office of Early Childhood Development.
Megan Peterson, for the record, yes, that's correct.
With respect to some of, and I have a couple questions, Madam Chair, if that's okay. So with respect to some of that, the federal funding piece, that seems, I mean, there's a good chunk that is in that Office of Early Learning and Childhood Development that's part of this pre-K, about $24.8 million per year, which I know some of that might be general fund request to go towards that. If we were to lose those Head Start dollars, do you know how much of that, or these other federal grants, how much of that is federal funding?
Megan Peterson, for the record, I don't want to quote inaccurate amounts on the record, but we can get you that breakdown.
Thank you. I would appreciate just having that information so we know just where those federal dollars reside, because I know that there have been conversations, certainly about the Head Start dollars. That obviously funds a significant portion of what we're talking about here, I think. And so it would be good to have those numbers just so that this committee can have an idea of what we're looking at should we lose those federal dollars within this particular budget account. Okay, with the expansion of the number of pre-K seats is being proposed to 6,122 in FY26 and then 8,222 in FY27, do program recipients have the staffing and physical capacity to accommodate the additional pupils?
Megan Peterson for the record. At this point, I'd like to turn that over to Director Patty Oya. She has the background and expertise to speak to that, and she's in Las Vegas.
Please go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning. For the record, this is Patty Oya, OYA, Director of the Office of Early Learning and Development. I am so sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, absolutely. So with the expansion of the number of pre-K seats, which is anticipated to be 6,122 in FY26 and then 8,222 in FY27, do the program recipients have the staffing and then the physical capacity to accommodate those additional students?
Yes, the short answer is yes, they do. We have already been in discussion. We already know there are waiting lists. It will depend on the requirements of the eligibility that we put in place, but yes, we are confident we can serve those children.
When you talk about the eligibility requirements that you put in place, what do you mean by that?
So currently for Nevada Ready, thank you, Jim. The Patty Oya for the record. Currently for the Nevada Ready program, it is 200% at or below 200% federal poverty levels for families to be eligible, and 4-year-olds only. For our early seats under the Early Childhood Innovative Literacy Program grants, we increase that to up to 250% federal poverty limit. No income eligibility for children with special needs or children with behavioral plans in place, and there are allowances for three-year-olds in certain situations. So, depending on where the funding sits and the requirements, if we could combine some of that and get it aligned, I think we definitely could serve more children. That's proposed in Senate Bill SB 58.
Yeah, and I think that was my question, because when you said that obviously we know that there's Senate Bill 58 out there that is still in the legislative process that would change some of these requirements for pre-K eligibility. And so I guess I'm sort of wondering, when you say depending upon eligibility requirements, is that just depending on where a family falls within those eligibility requirements you just mentioned? Is it depending on whether or not Senate Bill 58 passes? Or are you saying that you might have additional review or change of what those eligibility requirements may be depending on each family, regardless of whether or not SB 58 passes, or regardless of whether or not we're talking about where they fall in those parameters you just outlined?
Patty Oya for the record. The answer is depending on if Senate Bill 58 passes and how that looks.
Okay. You mentioned, and I think I have a couple more questions, Madam Chair. Can you please talk a little bit to us about the process for how those funds would be distributed to school districts and nonprofit organizations over the biennium?
So we would continue to, Patty Oya for the record, we would continue to allocate the funds in a similar manner that they are subawarded to the districts and to our nonprofits and state public charter school authority. One of our implementation ideas moving towards universal pre-K would be to put the school districts and fund it through not with the same funding, but fund it in the same mechanism as the pupil-centered funding plan. So it would, the district money, the LEA money would be in through the pupil-centered funding plan mechanism, but because nonprofits cannot go through that way, we would have a separate system and application process for those funds.
So that model of flowing it through the PCFP and then having a separate account for nonprofits is not the current method by which over this biennium you're going to distribute these funds. That is something that could potentially happen in the future. Because as I understand it, we are not flowing these funds through the PCFP. There's not a request here for an additional, a separate chunk of money to be sort of set aside in a budget account.
Patty Oya, for the record, that is correct.
Okay. So we're still talking about a sub-award process for nonprofits, charter schools, school districts.
Yes, Patty Oya, yes, that is correct.
Can you tell us what the current number of children is on the wait list for state pre-K programs? How many kids are on that wait list?
Patty Oya, for the record, in Clark County School District alone, we know that we have approximately 6,000 children. We do know statewide there are additional children. It is difficult to give you an exact number because many times school districts, especially Washoe and Clark County, where they're larger districts, they don't go through the eligibility process ahead of time because they don't want to make the families go and jump through that hoop before putting them on a wait list and not even know if they're going to get services. So they, as seats open, they do the eligibility process. So we don't always have an exact number of children on a waiting list that are eligible and ready to go for services.
In Clark County, that wait list number is 6,000, approximately.
Patty Oya, for the record, correct, for Clark County School District alone.
And these other school districts are just not keeping lists of how many children are on a wait list because they don't want to evaluate a family for eligibility?
We don't have the mechanism to collect the data from them. And so we do, we could call each district and ask, what is your wait list? But in general, yes. And like I said, in the larger districts, they don't want to, make eligible all those 6,000 children. They know they need services of some kind, and some might get served in Title Pre-K, some might get served in our programs. But in general, no. And then in the smaller districts, we do know there are children who are just above the eligibility. So while they're not on a waiting list, depending on which pot of funding, they might be able to serve those children. It's not quite the same as an actual waiting list, but there are different issues in the rural counties.
Sure. I guess to me, it seems as though this is information that the school district should be sharing with you all so that we have a better idea of how many kids out there are looking to get into pre-K, so that we can better assess whether or not, we're able to provide those seats and those spots for kids. This seems like information that we should at least be able to gather if folks are inquiring about pre-K seats, even if they're not having a wait list, to get some of this data from the school district. So, which I know is maybe not, if they're not giving it to you, I understand that's not maybe, that's maybe more a comment to the school districts than it is to the Department of Education. But to me, it seems like this is information that should not be that difficult to share in some regard, to get a more accurate understanding of the need out there. So that's all the questions that I have at this point, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I just want to clarify one thing. Am I correct? And I don't know whether it's Deputy or Superintendent or Ms. Oya that can answer this. Am I correct that Decision Unit 137 with the pre-kindergarten personnel support, am I correct or incorrect that this didn't make it in the governor's budget?
Megan Peterson for the record. So I believe that this was an ad after the original GovRec presentation. So this is part of the governor's recommended budget and is in support of additionally what's in budget account 2621.
So this was part of it as an additional support after that?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear on the record because I was under the impression that it did not make it in that budget. All right, thank you very much. All right, with that, if there are no more questions, we will move on to budget item. Hang on. Oh, we're still in the same budget. Sorry, I was trying to change budgets and we're not. Oops. Well, you know, sometimes you try to move faster than you want, Speaker. Okie doke. So with that, we do have Speaker Yeager who has his questions in hand.
I do.
And I was trying to get him to not ask, but I guess I'll let him go.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the indulgence. I have a couple questions on the expiration of the federal preschool development grant. So I was looking at the information here, and it looks like the interim finance committee back in April of 2023 and then the 82nd legislative session essentially approved $30 million in established authority for this program. And at the time, I believe during the last legislative session, the Department of Education had indicated that this money would fund 100 pilot seats that would focus on family child care providers and also 105 pilot seats to expand the current state pre-K program. But it doesn't look like any of those funds got used for any pre-K seats in either 2024 or 2025. So could you talk about why those grant funds were not utilized during the interim to fund additional pre-K seats?
Megan Peterson.
Patty Oya for the record.
Thank you.
Sorry, Megan.
Go ahead.
Patty Oya for the record. We did have those two pilots in the preschool development grant. One was to increase our eligibility requirements, but that's similar to what we did with the early childhood literacy program grants because we could get those seats started much faster. So the timing of the federal money and the timing of the 70 million, we were able to do that work and get those seats open much more quickly. In fact, we are still working with a national group and getting technical assistance and just getting ready to do some seats in family child care. It's a much difficult or much different process having seats in family child care as opposed to our districts or even our community-based programs that we've already been working with. So, you know, timing of the seats, the pilot, you know, just shows right now we're just getting those family child care seats up and running.
Could I ask a follow-up, Chair? Absolutely. Thank you. So I think I guess I just want to make sure I understand that response. So the money was there, but are you saying you were able to get the seats or get seats filled quicker using other funds? Because my understanding was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this money, the 30 million, was not utilized at all. And so I just want to confirm that that's the case. Because, and maybe I don't understand the process well enough, but I would just think with that $30 million out there, that could have been deployed for additional seats, especially considering that there's a wait list. So was it a capacity issue? If you could maybe just flesh that a little bit more to make sure I understand that response.
Patty Oya for the record. So the seats that were originally written into the federal award were minimal seats. One purpose was to increase the eligibility as recommended by our West Ed studies, and one was to try to include family child care home providers, licensed providers, into our community-based programs. So right now we have seats in child care centers. We don't have any seats in family home providers, which we want to give families the most options of where they send their child for pre-K. But to be clear, we did spend, and we are on track to spend the 30 million in the primary purpose of the federal grant was to build systems or expand existing programs that were successful. So we are still on track to spend the 30 million. It is just not for the minimal amount of seats that we had written in there as pilots.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you for that clarification. And then, Madam Chair, if I could just ask one additional question on this particular item. So, if you could just discuss, obviously, this grant is expiring. So, how is the expiration of the grant going to impact Nevada's early child care providers and education system, if at all?
Well, Patty Oya for the record. So we knew the grant was going to end December 30th, 2025. Obviously, we have had talks with the federal government about a no-cost extension. So previous preschool development grants that we received, we did get a no-cost extension through June 30th, 2026, or we were hoping to, and we've been told recently that's probably not going to happen, and we shouldn't certainly plan on that. So that's one piece of some of the changes in the funding that we've asked for. But a lot of the projects are things that we could build capacity or support or start and then and have an end date. So we knew, I mean, that's the other reason we didn't want to do a lot of seats is because of this end date. But there are impacts in the number of services. I'm trying to think, but a lot of it was plans or workforce or toolkits that we could develop, trainings that we could put in place. There is going to be some impact in services directly that when the grant ends.
Okay, thank you for that response. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I do believe we have some additional questions from Assemblymember Hadagi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to ask about the federal child care and development block grant reductions. Our notes indicate that there's going to be a decrease in the grant in fiscal year 2026, but I couldn't see the amount of the decrease. So can you talk to us about what you expect that decrease to be, and if you also anticipate a decrease for funding year, fiscal year 2027?
Patty Oya for the record. Our child care and development federal dollars come through the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. There is a requirement to spend that primarily is used for child care subsidy and child care resource and referral. There is a requirement to set aside 12% of those dollars, to a minimum of 12%, to improve quality of child care, and that's generally what has been awarded to the department. That 12% is 9% is general quality, 11% goes to infants and toddler, or 9 and 3 goes to infants and toddler care. The award process that we work with the Welfare Division is that annually we look at a budget, we submit that budget, and it's an annual award. So beyond FY26, we don't have our amounts, but in FY24, we were awarded $11.3 million. In FY25, it was 9.7, and for FY26, we are looking at $8 million. That brings the Welfare Division down to the minimum required amount, and they have told us that they had to do that because any dollars over the minimum would impact the subsidy program. There is no, and so that's why they have reduced our award. We don't know the amount for FY27. We would expect it would be similar, but that, like I said, that's an annual award, annual process.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. And can I jump ahead and ask about the kindergarten entry assessment contracts, Madam Chair? Okay, thank you. And so I do have some questions regarding the kindergarten entry assessments contract. Can you kind of give us more information about how the contract helps the Nevada Department of Education comply with NRS 388.157, which indicates the department must adopt regulations prescribing procedures?
Patty Oya for the record, and yes, we did adopt those regulations. It does say that the kindergarten assessment must be administered within 45 days within the first start of school, and then the districts must report those results to us. And so we went through the RFP process. Teaching Strategies Gold was the tool that was selected. It's an observation-based tool that can be administered with the child, watching the child within the school day. So a little bit different in assessment than what we had been using before, where they just do check marks. And you know, but they can enter the results in an online system through Teaching Strategies that gets transmitted to us. There's two purposes to a kindergarten entry. One, the more important one, is when you have a group of 20, 25 kindergartners coming into the classroom. As you know, they will be all in very different developmental places. Some will be coming from pre-K. We like to think that those children will be more prepared, but you'll have a wide range. And this should really help the teachers understand what they need to be teaching for each child. At a department level, it helps us collect the information, and we can start to look at longitudinally, are children more prepared as they're coming into kindergarten, and where are they coming from? We can only right now track children in Nevada Ready Pre-K, but I think at a broader level, we'll start to be able to do more with that data. The official implementation for the KEA is next school year, 25-26.
Thank you. And follow up, Madam Chair? Okay, thank you. And I know it's not known if the preschool development grant would be able to support the cost of the contract in fiscal year 2026. So what are the ramifications if the contract to provide kindergarten entry assessments aren't funded?
So we will have to cancel the contract. We used ARP ESSER to fund the first year of a contract. So we pay at the end of the fiscal year for the next school year. So we used ARP ESSER funding to fund the first year. The second year, we're using preschool development grant. Before the grant ends, we're expecting that next invoice soon. And then, yes, we would not have funding. We wouldn't be able to collect the data. We can't turn that cost over to the districts.
And just to follow up on that, and so have you explored any other funding sources?
No, we don't have another funding source. I mean, we certainly are always looking for other additional funding sources. Sorry, Patty Way for the record. So no, we do not have another funding source, and we would not be in compliance with the NRS.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member. And with that, I have a couple questions that I would like to ask. So, what challenges then has the department experienced in managing this workload of child care sites participating in the Quality Rating and Improvement System program?
Patty Oya for the record. So with each reduction in funding from the child care program, we haven't really eliminated any programs, but we certainly have cut back, and that reduces the number of trainings that can be eligible. And so remember, in childcare, they have requirements through licensing that they have annual trainings. We aren't able to support as many coaches in the quality rating and improvement system. There's longer waiting lists. We have a Teach Early Childhood Nevada Scholarship Program that supports specifically early childhood providers, and there's just more waiting lists. We haven't eliminated any programs. We've reduced. So one of the programs that I know is very well utilized is our child care substitute program. So if a child care provider calls out, they can maintain the ratios for licensing, and we've had to cut staff in there. And this is through, and I say we, but it's through our partners that we subaward to.
Thank you. So with the addition of the new Education and Information Officer position, can you address the current wait list of 65 child care centers waiting to be onboarded into the Quality Rating and Improvement System and assist with the increase in that state-funded pre-K, the state-funded pre-K seats in each year of the biennium?
Patty Oya for the record. So for our quality rating and improvement system, we do have different models, and so we do use the child care funding. Obviously, for the child care model, we have one that's just starting for the family child care We actually have a pilot for a tribal childcare as well. But for the school district and Nevada Ready pre-K programs, that funding, we've been able to still utilize the child care and development funds, but with the recent reductions, we're no longer to do that. So if we want to monitor quality for our pre-K programs and include them in the same system, we need that extra person, and we need to be able to fund that and not pull away services. We feel very strongly with child care funds that we still be able to support the child care providers.
Thank you. And how many additional sites, inclusive of the 65 child care centers currently on the wait list, does the department project participating in the quality rating and improvement system during the 25-27 biennium that would require assistance?
This is Patty Oya for the record. To get the exact breakdown, I think I would have to get back to you on exactly what one position supports. I don't have that information.
Thank you very much. We know that 65 are on the list, so that's already a huge number. So thank you very much for that information, and we look forward to hearing more. And I believe Assembly Member Beckus has a couple questions.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I had a couple questions, and I apologize if you may have provided this answer. I had stepped out, but I just wanted to follow up on the new Education and Information Officer position. As I understand, the federal preschool development grant is going to expire halfway through fiscal year 2026. And so the department indicated through the materials we received that the federal child care and development block grant is no longer able to fund the position in fiscal year 2027. And so my question is, how does the department plan to fund the new education information officer throughout the entire biennium?
This is Patty Oyer for the record. Megan, can you answer that one?
Megan Peterson for the record. This was originally contemplated as a request for general fund. As we have gone on, that conversation has also evolved and tried to look at using CCDF funds, but obviously that is being cut as well. So we are continuing to evaluate options and look at how we can facilitate that funding. Those conversations are still ongoing, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Ms. Peterson. So I assume once you kind of figure out the funding mechanism, a budget amendment would be forthcoming.
Megan Peterson, yes, that's correct.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for that information. Thank you for all your hard work with our earliest learners. And we will go on to Budget Account 2621, which will also cover early childhood literacy and readiness.
Megan Peterson for the record. So this budget account was established and is hosting the funds that were provided through Assembly Bill 400 during the last legislative session. As you may recall, $140,070,000 over each fiscal year was established to provide that funding, and I'm on to Nevada Ready Pre-K with that as well. And so, as mentioned, these are all providing services for early learning for pre-K development. And so the enhancement for this budget account, it was recommended as a one-shot appropriation, a continuation of what was recommended and provided for this biennium, $70 million in each year to continue providing funding for early childhood innovation and literacy programs to improve outcomes for our earliest learners to set them up for success as they enter the K-12 system. And that is the only enhancement for this budget account, so I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much, and I believe Assemblymember Backus has one.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I actually have a couple on this. if I may, Ms. Peterson, I'm not sure if you're the right person for this or if someone else, but can we get an overview of the successes and challenges in administering the early childhood literacy and readiness account funding during the current biennium? I guess it would also be during the current biennium we're in right now.
Megan Peterson, I am going to defer to Director Oya for this one.
Patty Oya for the record. The challenges was just the timing and the start of the first year of the biennium. So to run in the bill, it said to run a competitive process to award these funds. So we had to wait until we officially had them in our budget. We had to develop an application process, rubrics, give applicants time to apply. We had to get a committee together to score the applications and then award the whole award process. And even when that we allocated some funding for seats, our current grantees, they need a little bit of time to hire a teacher, set up a classroom. Obviously, pre-K classrooms are very different than K-12. So that piece of setting things up the first year. And so and we didn't know what the interest was going to be at that time because this was very new. And so when we did the application process, we ended up doing 3 rounds of funding. And so we saw what went out the door, what was going to be awarded. So I mean, our initial, even just for pre-K seats, was very low, our initial numbers. But as the year went on, we were able to add more. The second year was much smoother, but there was still some delays in getting the money because it was still another application process. But we were obviously a little more prepared to do so quicker in the second year.
Thank you. And I kind of take what happened in the second year as part is that some of the successes with the program. Can you elaborate if there have been other successes?
Patty Oya for the record, yes, and I didn't mean to ignore the successes because yes, we definitely did have some. And so compared to this first year to the second year, we did increase our seat numbers by 1,989 seats. We were able to add 3 new districts or communities to the pre-K programs. And then we were there were a lot of great programs that we were able to fund beyond the seats. We've heard from school districts that the aids and helping in literacy in kindergarten classrooms was invaluable. As we all know, kindergarten classrooms, even though they turn 5, there's a lot of very similar behaviors in 4s. And so to have one kindergarten teacher for 25 kids, maybe even more, is quite different than having an aide and a pre-K teacher for a group of 20. So the books to children was a big piece, professional development on curriculum like letters. Those were kind of the successes of the programs that we also above and beyond our seat numbers.
And Madam Chair, if I may ask a couple follow-up questions. And I'm not sure where we're at for fiscal year 2025 with the allocation of monies from the last legislative session, but if it wasn't being fully exhausted in that second year, I was kind of curious how we came back to allocating a recommendation of 70 million in each year to continue funding these 2 programs if the amounts haven't been fully utilized.
Yeah.
Patty Oya for the record. So the funding for FY24 did not carry forward, and unfortunately, we weren't able to expend all of the funding. But for fiscal year 2025, we have allocated all of the funding, and we do expect a much higher percentage of spending.
That is great. So now that makes sense that the funding is to continue consistent with that fiscal year 25 then. Going to my last question was, please discuss the impact on the literacy programs as the allocation indicated by the department would decrease from 37.2 million in fiscal year 2026 to 17.4 million in fiscal year 2027.
Patty Oya for the record. We are prioritizing, if the funding is allocated again, we are prioritizing to continue increasing the seat numbers as we feel like that is the biggest impact on literacy. We are expecting there will still be some funding for the projects, but, and again, it would be a competitive process. But we do know, we want to encourage seats for pre-K.
Okay, I have a quick question following up on the Assembly member. So how would the approval then of the budget amendment, which proposes to shift funding for the early childhood literacy and readiness program from ongoing support to one-time general fund appropriation, impact those pre-K seats and literacy programs?
Patty Oya for the record. Thank you. That's a great question because that is something we think about all the time in terms of it's just the consistency of funding. So if you think about the process of going through session, waiting till May, June to hear the budget amount, and then turning around and it's hard for programs to say they want to increase seats when they think about a 2-year process. And so if it was consistent funding as opposed to a one-time appropriation, it really gives us the stability of funding that programs need to ensure that they can set up classrooms. So if, we work closely with the LEAs, the charter schools, and especially United Way of Southern Nevada, where they can really talk and try to increase seats. But if they have to wait for that funding approval and then every 2 years, it's really hard to commit to that. And then in the school districts, we hear all the time how the larger school districts have to do a reduction or put people on hold, teachers on hold, to see if the funding will come through and then rehire them, as opposed to K-12 teachers who get to be on contracts and continue through. What happens a lot of times, maybe our new pre-K teachers are excited, they love pre-K in a school district, but after a few years of being told, well, we're hoping for funding and we think we're going to get funding, but we'll let you know, they switch over to kindergarten, first grade, and they say, well, at least it's a stable funding source for that to support their own lives and families.
Thank you. Yeah, I always worry about our littlest people, so thank you very much. Any additional questions on this particular budget item? All right, seeing none, we will move on to budget account 2721.
Megan Peterson for the record. Budget account 2721 provides the funding for our Office of a Safe and Respectful Learning Environment. This is the office that oversees not only the Safe Voice reporting platform, but as well as our Handle with Care programs, providing support and technical assistance to school districts and charter schools to provide supports for, as it says in the name, a safe and respectful learning environment, assisting with the coping skills and mechanisms associated with that, especially if a trauma is experienced by a student, and ensuring the overall health and not only mental and behavioral health for our students. The first enhancement for this budget account, actually both of the positions on this slide are recommended for removal from the budget due to expiration of or ending of 2 grants, the school-based mental health grant as well as the Time Initiative grant. And so you can see also reflected in the amounts recommended for removal are the total authority for those programs as well in fiscal year 27. And so we will be removing 2 education program professional positions as a result of the expiration of those grants. Alternative funding sources we have tried to do research and identify alternative funding sources to keep those positions, but at this point in time, we've been unsuccessful in identifying those opportunities. The next set of enhancements, again, alignment with our office space and the costs that go with that. Zoom and Smartsheet licenses for the day-to-day operations, and then funding for the Safe Voice platform to continue those services. Previously, those were paid for with grants. Those grants have now ended, and we are looking to incorporate this into the base budget with general funds to ensure continuity of the operations of that platform. If you are not familiar with that, that is the TIP platform or hotline platform for students to report and in community to report concerns about safety in a school. And it does allow school staff to connect with resource officers and so on to provide supports in the instance of a threat to a school. It is a 24/7 platform as well, so students in the community can reach it at any point in time. And then the next enhancement, this one removes funding again for a grant that is ending. It did not have positions associated with it specifically. That was work that is existing within staff. So this just eliminates the authority associated with it, and that is the Stop School Violence Prevention Program grant. Finally, we have one-shot appropriations for this budget account. The first is for an enhancement to our Infinite Campus platform. This would allow us to create a custom report that would allow us to on disproportionate data, discipline data within school districts, so that way we can track and monitor that to help provide technical assistance in areas where we may see abnormally high discipline actions being taken within schools. The next is an enhancement for $3 million in each year of the biennium to continue and enhance a contract that provides technical assistance and implementation of multi-tiered systems of support within our state, and providing the tools and information necessary to districts who are working to implement that universally within their districts. And then finally, we have enhancements again for our computers that are identified for replacement per the 5-year schedule. And I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much for that information. And I believe Assemblymember Torres Fawcett has a question or two.
Thank you. I'm going to have a couple questions, Chair. Thank you for the overview of Safe Voice. I think it's a really great program that does help us support students. So what are the factors that are contributing to the increase in Safe Voice tips from FY23 to 24?
Megan Peterson for the record. I am going to look to my counterpart, Deputy Superintendent Christy McGill, and she can provide you with that information.
Good morning, Deputy Superintendent Christy McGill, MCGILL for the record. And since the inception of Safe Voice, we have seen an increase year over year, around 6% of the tips. Each of the tip categories, the top 5, just so you guys know, is the first most popular tip. For example, in 2024 was school to employee complaint at 1,318, threat to student at 1,226, handle with care, and this is the program where if a law enforcement officer goes to a scene and then there's children involved, that law enforcement officer will then create a Safe Voice tip back to the school saying that this child has experienced a traumatic event. Unfortunately, we've seen this category go up probably the most, and that's at 995. Suicide threats last year were 841, and bullying was 769. So since the inception of this program, we've seen a steady increase in tips.
Thank you. What are some of the benefits for schools utilizing the behavior threat and suicide assessment services provided through the amended Safe Voice platform contract?
Christy McGill for the record. One of the pieces of threat assessment that we really wanted to ensure is that training that aligned with evidence-based protocols were there so that when a tip like from a threat to school came across, all schools, no matter where they are, have the tools they need to respond to that threat. And so that training was rolled into the platform itself. And then also we created county-to-county supports in the threat assessment process. One of the pieces of this grant, the Department of Justice grant, was a 2-year grant to help us look at a couple pilots. So one was the training pilot, that went well. Another component of the pilot was the case management system within the P3 system itself. That did not go as well, and so right now we're looking at amending the contract to move it from the case management system into more training and our MTSS, which was also a third component of the new grant.
Thank you. And how does the department mitigate against schools not having enough information to pursue it? One of the complaints that I've heard from principals is that you get a complaint, something, weapon on campus, without having any information. So what guidance then is given to schools so that they can make sure that, one, they support or address the issue, but that, two, they can make sure that all students involved, including the student reporting the incident, feel safe?
Thank you for the question. Christy McGill for the record. So I would be remiss to say that this Safe Voice project really is a collective impact project between the Department of Public Safety, the districts themselves, and the Department of Education. So there's a lot of good collaboration between local law enforcement and the schools. It may look a little different in each district. For example, in Lyon County, they contract with Lyon County Sheriff to come in and have school resource officers, whereas CCSD has local police force as well as Washoe County. So each one of them has a little bit different protocols, but they work together to really ensure that each tip is taken very seriously. They go with as much information as they can, and the reason why the tips are immediately transferred to the local level is because local people know more information than anyone else. So they can determine whether or not the threat is real or, nothing to be concerned about. But they work really well, the districts work really well with our local law enforcement to determine that.
Thank you. And is there any way for us to get the information on how many of these calls or tips were substantiated versus not substantiated, or we weren't able to get enough information to tell?
Christy McGill for the record. We did do a period in time evaluation of Safe Voice to look at that piece. I can provide you with that evaluation. And it really depends on the tip, whether or not it was substantiated or not. So we can provide that information in that evaluation for you.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, the way it's written into law, there's no way then for us to go back and get my understanding is that there is no we don't track the phone number or any of that information, right? Because of the way that it's currently written into law. Is that correct?
Christy McGill for the record. That is correct. And that is to really maintain the anonymous and the confidentiality of the platform.
Thank you. I just had one more question in regard to the contract. How did the department determine that the budgeted licensing fee amount of $322,000 in each year of the upcoming biennium, given that the actual cost incurred in the amended contract is $169,000 and some change for FY 2025?
So, Christy McGill for the record. This grant started actually in December, so it's a little bit odd because it's a 15-month contract instead of a 24. So what you'll see, the differences between the contract and what we have is that piece as well. Also, in addition, there is a Safe Voice plugin that is per tip, and so you may see a little bit of differentiation in that as well. Anything to add?
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Monroe Moreno, did you have a question?
I do. I have two, if that's okay,
Please.
Madam Chair. Thank you. The Education Programs Professional position is currently funded with a federal grant, and that's scheduled to end, I believe, in September of this year. So has there been any discussion or consideration for repurposing that position to other duties and responsibilities with the Office of Safe and Respectful Learning, or perhaps to continue to fund the position with a different funding source to continue supporting schools with mental health related issues?
Christy McGill for the record. The Office of Safe and Respectful Learning has always really depended on, as well as most of the mental health services in Nevada, discretionary funds. And so we've always applied for funds. We have never had this where there's just the grants are not available right now. So we are scrambling a little bit to figure out, but the long and the short of it is we're really trying to help the district maintain mental health services at the local level. And we will do the best we can here, but without those funds, services will decrease.
Just a quick follow-up. So, we hear about the mental health challenges that our children are going through every day, but not only the children, the staff and the teachers in the classrooms. So without this position, if it has to be eliminated, if we're not able to find funding to continue it, can you tell us more about what those direct impacts are going to be at the school level?
Christy McGill for the record. So at the state level, the role of the mental health piece is to help the districts in a couple things. One is to really help with the differentiation. I think you all have been hearing for several years now that the mental health needs in our schools have substantially increased and also become more complex as this nation suffers from incredible rates of chronic disease. And these show up in our schools. And so one of the roles of this EPP was to work with our NSHE system to make sure that as, for example, behaviors arise in our school, or to monitor the Safe Voice tips to see what kinds of tips and trends are happening, to align that with training. So that was one piece. Also, these grants, the bigger story is that most of the money of these federal grants went to our districts that provided direct mental health services to our children. And so we have been working, for example, with Washoe and Carson, who is a recipient of these grants, to say, can we offset some of this with Medicaid, and other funds. But these kinds of services have always depended on discretionary funds and come and go.
Thank you for that. It's unfortunate, but I appreciate the answer. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And I will go to Speaker Yeager.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions on E491, which is the expiration of the federal Now is the Time Initiative grant funds and the elimination of the education program's professional position. So regarding that decision unit, has the department considered repurposing the education program professional position for other duties and responsibilities within the Office of State and Respectful Learning, or continuing to fund the position with a different funding source so we can continue to support schools participating in Project Aware?
Christy McGill for the record. And I want to clarify, I think my answer previously was this one, but so we have a state-funded position which looks over school health services and Medicaid. That was unfilled for 8 months because of licensing and getting people in. But good news is we have that position filled now. The position that I was talking about previously with the Now's the Time, it's called our Project Aware. You are correct. That is the one that will be terminating. Again, we have always sustained this position in the past with discretionary funds, but literally they're not there right now on grants.gov. And so we will look at, how do we work with our INSHE partners and our district partners to do the best we can to maintain these services. But again, the big part of that Project Aware grant went to our districts for mental health services.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up, Chair. I think you might have touched on this in the prior answer, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I just want to ask it for the record. So, it sounds like this position is going to be eliminated. That is what's proposed to be happening. But how is that going to impact the Project Aware program?
Christy McGill for the record. So the Project Aware program as we know it right now will cease to exist.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And with that, if I see no more questions on this particular item, we will move on to Budget Account 2710, and we need to shift a little bit up here, so give us just a minute. Okay, it takes a village, and the next part of the village is here. So we will go on to Budget Account 2710, COVID-19 funding, and thank you to the Superintendent and Deputy for being here again. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Megan Peterson for the record. Budget account 2710 was an account that was created when the COVID-19 pandemic hit to house the 3 different pots of funding that we received to assist with the results of that situation. Several of those pots of funding have since expired, ESSER 1, ESSER 2. ESSER 3 has officially expired. We did receive late liquidation approval for both our ESSER 2, Gear 2, and ESSER 3 funds, and so we are starting to wrap those up. We did have approval through March 2026, with us ending our projects in January 2026 to finish paying out by March of that year. So the enhancement for this budget account is E490, which represents the removal of the authority from the budget in fiscal year 27, because it does branch over into calendar year 26, which is part of fiscal year 27, for the elimination of the authority associated with those grants. I will pause for questions.
Thank you very much, and I have one. Why was it that the 1.8 million in those ESSER 2 funding was not eligible for an extended liquidation?
Megan Peterson for the record. That was a result of timing ultimately around the ability to reallocate those funds. There were savings identified for some of the projects, and we had passed the obligation date in order to be able to reobligate them to a project, and so we were not able to fully expend those. It was also a combination of reversions from some of the school districts in their subgrants.
So did we totally lose those funds?
Those funds were reverted to the federal government.
Okay, thank you. All right, I believe that the majority leader has a couple, 3 questions or so, whatever. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can you tell us how much of the ESSER 3 funds were approved to be liquidated beyond that September 30th, 2024 deadline?
Megan Peterson for the record. I can get you the final number. It was approximately $34 million.
And how much do you estimate will be reverted to the federal government at the end of that liquidation extension period?
Megan Peterson, for the record, because we're still working with school districts, a large portion of that is attributed to the 90% set aside that was required to go to them. We're still working through what that may or may not look like, and also working with the districts to find all of the backup and receipts in order to be able to claim those reimbursements. So that is something we're still continuing to work through right now.
Okay. Can you give us an overview of how the ESSER 3 subawards were utilized at the local education agency level?
Megan Peterson, for the record. So once we transitioned to the ESSER 3 phase, that is where we moved more from providing protective equipment, PPE, and things like that during the initial phase. So the third phase transitioned more to supporting learning loss, stabilizing operations after the initial wave of the pandemic. And so it did focus more on individual supports to students, helping them recover from their time.
Okay, so those went more then to those student supports, and that's how those subawards were used?
Megan Peterson, for the record. Yes, and one specific example where we had a required minimum amount to expend on it included summer and after-school enrichment activities, again, to help really with learning loss for students.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Superintendent.
Thank you. I'd just like to expand, not only for the Senator, thank you for the question, but Superintendent Ebert, for the record, the public as well. All of the reimbursements for all three of those funds, we did create a transparency website, and so people can go and see exactly what each of the school districts expended the funds on.
Okay, great. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks to both of you. Any additional questions from the committee on this particular budget? Okay, seeing none, I will close the budget hearing on these 7 Nevada Department of Education budget accounts today. I thank you all, your entire team, Superintendent and Deputy Superintendent, for being here and for your expertise and all your work with education and our kids. So thank you. And with that, I will now go to our last agenda item of the day, which is public comment. For those of you making public comment, please remember to state and spell your name for the record. And to, when you get ready to call in, if you are doing that to provide testimony, please dial 888-475-4499. When prompted, the meeting ID will be 872-8669-6465, and then press pound. All right, with that, is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to give public comment? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Rachel Croft, RACHELCROFT, and I'm a National Board Certified Teacher in Carson City. I've seen firsthand how funding impacts students, teachers, and schools across Nevada. Right now, too many of our classrooms are overcrowded, our teachers are underpaid, and our schools lack the resources that they need to provide a high-quality education. Pass the Plan is not just an investment in schools, it's an investment in Nevada's future. I'll never forget the year that I had students packed into my overcrowded classroom. Every day was a whirlwind, managing lessons, answering questions, and doing my best to give each child the attention that they deserved. But at the end of the day, I'd sit at my desk exhausted, and a question haunted me. Did I even talk to Danny today? See, Danny was a quiet student, the kind of student who didn't demand my attention, and I knew that if I wasn't intentional, he could slip through the cracks. So I made a commitment, no matter how chaotic the day, I would find a chance, a way to connect with him. And that meant working late into the night, planning every moment meticulously, ensuring that I had time to check in with him and every other student that needed me. And let me tell you, that burns a teacher out. Teachers shouldn't have to choose between their students and their own well-being. When class sizes are too large and resources are stretched too thin, students like Danny don't always get the attention that they need. And teachers, we pushed ourselves to the brink, trying to compensate for a system that isn't giving us enough support. If Nevada fully funded its schools, we could reduce class sizes, ensuring that every student, especially the quiet ones like Danny, get the attention that they deserve. We could provide teachers with the support that they need to do their jobs without sacrificing their health. We could build a system where teachers don't have to go home wondering if they missed a child that needed them. This isn't just about budgets, it's about kids, it's about teachers, it's about the bus drivers who greet the students every morning and the cafeteria staff who make sure that they don't go hungry. It's about the countless others, all of us who show up every day to support Nevada students. It's about the future of Nevada, and I urge you to pass the plan so that every student in every classroom gets the education that they deserve. Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Alexander Marks with the Nevada State Education Association. I'm going to read a letter from Vicki Kreidel, who's a reading teacher in Clark County School District. In my 22-year career, I've seen many lean years in public education, and as we head towards the end of this school year, we're finding out most schools will be facing deep budget cuts. No cut is harmless. Let me tell you about my site, Hurd Elementary, as we head into next year. Ultimately, we're losing 5 classrooms and multiple senior educators are facing a surplus. All of our coaching positions will be gone, and the reading center that I work in for the last 3 years will be closed. It's very interesting to see the department seeking to add an educational program supervisor while the governor's budget cuts education programs in our schools. It's also very sad because our center serves limited English proficient students. We have excitedly watched them improve their English and reading skills in this room. My school will be dealing with larger class sizes, a skeleton version of our staff, and almost no money for anything extra. That's not what our students deserve. If the legislature would pass the plan, we'd reach adequate funding levels. With proper funding, our school district would have more stability. We could fully fund our schools and would enable them to improve salaries and better recruit and retain licensed educators. Because ultimately, to provide the children of Nevada with fully funded education system, it will prepare them to be citizens and the community members that we all need. This is not an isolated story, as you've just heard from my colleague Rachel. You've been hearing stories like this from NSCA members all session. We have seen the good work that can be accomplished when we fully fund public education. However, we can't just be the guy in the Letterman jacket talking about the good old days 2 years ago. We have to pass the plan. Today is day 39, and the governor's budget is offering just $2 per student, and that is unacceptable. $2 will not keep up with increasing costs or the 3.5 PERS increase coming in July. Last session, the governor decided to call himself the education governor. This year, he's just low budget Lombardo. Pass the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional public comment here in Carson City? Seeing none, any public comment in Las Vegas? And AVH on the phone lines.
If you'd like to provide public comment, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Please go ahead, caller, with the phone number ending in 669. You are online now. Caller, you may go ahead with the phone number ending in 669. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Don Darrell Loop. Could you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning to you and the rest of the wonderful, enlightening committee. This is Dora Martinez. First, Senator, I want to thank you for always saying the ID code number slowly so people who are blind and ASL users can understand and dial in as you say it. I want to ditto the prior public commenters, and also just to put it in the forefront in everybody's mind in the education department that the students who are visually impaired and other disabled students and students who are hard of hearing and deaf are left behind. I worked with a mom who had a student who has a child who is blind and is a Spanish-speaking student only. She was 10, and they wouldn't provide her Braille. They would just give her audio instructions, and that's setting up her to fail, because Braille is the blind person's equivalent to alphabet. If without Braille, the student will not know how to write, spell, and do everyday things and get a job when they are able to. And so the mom up and moved them to Idaho, where they have a Spanish-speaking teacher who is teaching her Braille right now. So please, like Miss Rachel and the other commenters, do not forget the students, especially students who are disabled, because one day they could be our leader, just like Helen Keller. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any additional callers online, AVH?
Caller, please press *6 to unmute your microphone. You may go ahead.
Hi, my name's Kimberly Shepard. It's H-E-P-H-E-R-D. I'm an adaptive physical education specialist at Carson City School District. I've dedicated my career to supporting students with diverse needs, ensuring they have access to quality physical education and learning experiences that foster their growth and well-being. I'm here today to express my strong support for Pass the Plan initiative. As an educator working directly with students, I have seen firsthand how funding challenges impact our schools. Limited resources have led to staffing shortages, larger class sizes, and fewer opportunities to provide the individualized support for our students deserve. Pass the Plan is critical for ensuring Nevada schools receive the funding necessary to attract and retain qualified educators, provide vital resources for students, and maintain programs that promote academic success and overall well-being. Without this plan, students in Carson City and across Nevada risk losing essential services that empower them to thrive. By investing in our schools, we are investing in our future, one that ensures all students, regardless of background or ability, have the tools and support that they need to succeed. I urge this body to stand with educators, students, and families by supporting the Pass the Plan initiative. Thank you for your time and commitment to Nevada students.
Thank you very much. AVH, next caller, please.
Good morning, members of the committee, fellow Nevadans. My name is Matthew Winterhawk. I stand before you today as a father, taxpayer, concerned constituent who has reviewed the Nevada 25 to 27 educational budget. And what I see is deeply troubling. Millions of taxpayer dollars are being mismanaged, shuffled around without explanation, and spent on bureaucracy instead of the students. So I'm here to voice my concerns today, but also demand action and accountability with it. Number one, pandemic relief funds are still being used. In 2025 to 2027, ESSER 3 and ARPA funding are meant for emergency response and continue to be used with no clear plan to phase it out. Why is pandemic-era funding still propping up Nevada's education budget years later? And my question to that, who approved these ongoing expenditures and where's the oversight? Number two issue that I bring up is $70 million in early literacy funding disappeared and then suddenly reappeared. Now, the state's literacy budget, which is BA 2621, allocated $70 million in 24-25, and then in 25-26, the amount was cut to zero. 26 to 27, it magically reappears. Where did that money go? Why was it removed for a year? And how did the state justify slashing the literacy funding for 1 year and then reinstate it later, a year later, without any explanation? That's not fiscal responsibility. It's budget manipulation. Now I'm calling on this committee to conduct a full audit and determine where the $70 million went and why was it removed. Issue number 3 with this, school safety and mental health funding is being gutted while bureaucracy expands. The budget makes it clear that bureaucracy is growing, but student resources are shrinking. The Safe and Respectful Learning Budget Act, BA 2721, increased to $9.9 million in 2024. Now it went up to $13.8 million in 2026, but then crashed back down to $3.3 million in 2027. Now, school-based mental health services dropped from $2 million in 2026 to just $14,000 in 2027. Funding for violence prevention programs were also cut by over 90%. So while these programs are being slashed, travel and administrative salaries are being doubled in some areas. Now, why are we cutting funding that keeps students safe and increasing spending on bureaucracy? This is not responsible governance. The committee must demand a full breakdown on these budgets and restore funding for school safety programs. The 4th issue I bring up about this budget is millions in taxpayer money is moved without any explanation. Multiple budgets, millions of dollars being quietly moved between the departments with no explanation. $1.14 million was transferred into early learning, BA 2709 in 2026, and then removed later in 2027. The transfer from student programs into administrative expenses with no clear justification. This is also not transparency. This is mismanagement of public funds. I demand that all those transfers be publicly disclosed and justified before approval. Number 5, and I apologize for the length, but wasteful spending on unnecessary contracts and software. Taxpayer money currently is being used and wasted on consulting contracts, software, instead of helping the students. $3 million was allocated for vague multi-tiered support frameworks in BA 2721. Expensive subscriptions to Smartsheet, Zoom, and Office 365 are draining money that's meant for education. Now, if millions can be spent on consultants and software, but we can't fund school safety and literacy programs, something is seriously wrong here. Now, I'm demanding that this committee reevaluate these wasteful expenditures and shift funds back into the direct student support. And I'm asking the committee to take immediate action, full independent audit of the NDE budget 24 to 27, provide public explanation for the disappearance and reallocation of educational funds, halt all interdepartmental budget transfers until full transparency is provided, eliminate administrative waste, and redirect the funds to classroom and student safety, require clear public reporting on how every educational dollar is spent. Nevada's education system should prioritize students, not the bureaucrats. Now it's time to hold these responsible and accountable and get the real transparency for the taxpayers' money and how it's spent. I thank you all for your time today, and I have submitted my full report as an official record.
Thank you
And
very
for the
much.
record, my name is Matthew Winterhawk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional callers online?
If you have recently joined us and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good morning. My name is Terry Schumann, and I'm calling from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm a teacher family assistant in the Clark County School District. Today I'm here to speak on Pass the Plan. Education is important to me because it's about the kids. While working in the kids class that is 3, 4, and 5-year-olds up to 6 students, I can only count it a miracle to see how much they grow and learn by being in a classroom. By using music, songs, manipulatives, and yes, even snacks, I can see how much they are learning the basics and learning to get along with each other. The only problem is that our school district is really short on special needs teachers and support staff. Two years ago, we asked the legislature to approve time for 20, which meant that every employee would be able to receive at least $20 and to have only 20 students in a classroom. Even though our schools did receive more, our classroom sizes still expanded. Even our autistic class, who was supposed to have only 9 to 10 students, was up to 14. This got to be a little bit too much, but it was still amazing to see them learn. This year, we are asking you to approve past the plan. This means passing our taxes to make them go even higher. I know that's a lot to ask. I know our sales tax is high enough, but 3 years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to move into my own home. At that time, I did not even know about a property tax. I was surprised to find out that somebody was asking me to pay a fund on my land. When the bill showed up, I was shocked, and I was not prepared for it. I myself, though, would be willing to, because I've been here for 3 years, but I am used to paying it for the past 2, and I would be willing to have the property tax raised at $50 to $75, knowing only if it went to our schools, and that our classes would be able to benefit, and by not having extended class sizes and to retaining our teachers. Please help us pass the plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are there any additional callers online?
Thank you, Chair. The line is open and working, but there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you very much. All right, with that completes our agenda for today. I'd like to thank everyone for being here this morning, especially our presenters. And tomorrow morning, we will be in joint full committee starting at 8 a.m., and this meeting is adjourned.